Story 1. The Cabin That Wasn't There. My name is James Hollister, and I've been a mountain rescue coordinator in the Colorado Rockies for 19 years. I've seen plenty of close calls, recovered bodies from avalanches, and talked people through situations that should have killed them. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at someone. I was wrong. On December 18, 2020, I was leading a rescue operation near Mount Elbert, Colorado's highest peak at 14,440 feet. A group of 3 hikers had called 911 around 2:07 p.m., reporting they were caught in a sudden blizzard and disoriented. The temperature was dropping fast, already at minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills pushing it down to minus 40. They had maybe 2 hours of daylight left and the storm was intensifying. Our team mobilized immediately. 6 of us, including myself, headed up the South Ridge Trail where the hikers had last reported their position. The wind was brutal, gusting up to 60 miles per hour, carrying snow so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. We were all experienced, equipped with proper gear, GPS units, avalanche beacons, and communication equipment. This was difficult but manageable. We found the hikers within 45 minutes. 3 college students from Denver, woefully unprepared, wearing inadequate clothing and carrying minimal supplies. They were hypothermic but alive. We got thermal blankets on them, hot packs activated, and started the descent immediately. The blizzard was worsening, visibility dropping to almost zero. That's when Marcus Chen, one of my team members, went missing. One moment he was right behind me, helping support one of the hikers. The next time I looked back, he was gone. Just vanished into the whiteout. I called his name. Nothing. We all stopped, shouting into the wind. The radios crackled with static. Then Marcus's voice came through. "James, I see lights. There's a cabin about 50 yards east of our position. We should take shelter, wait out the worst of this storm." I checked my GPS. There was no cabin on the map anywhere near our position. I'd been climbing this mountain for 2 decades. There were no structures in this area, just wilderness. "Marcus, there's no cabin up here. What's your exact position?" I'm looking right at it. Wood cabin, maybe 20 by 20 feet, smoke coming from the chimney. Someone's inside. We can get help. Every instinct told me this was wrong. But we were in a life-threatening situation. The hikers were fading and the storm was getting worse. If there really was shelter nearby, we needed it. "Everyone stay together. We move toward Marcus's position. Nobody separates." We followed Marcus's radio signal, pushing east through thigh-deep snow. The GPS showed us moving away from the trail into an area marked as steep terrain and rock fields. Dangerous even in good weather. Then we saw it. Through the swirling snow, a light appeared, warm, orange, flickering like firelight. As we got closer, the shape of a cabin materialized. Old-style log construction, peaked roof heavy with snow, one window glowing with that warm light. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. Marcus was standing at the door, waving us forward. Something felt fundamentally wrong. The cabin looked old, like it had been there for a century, but there was no weathering on the logs, no signs of age. The snow around it sat in perfectly smooth drifts, undisturbed by wind despite the blizzard raging everywhere else. And that smoke from the chimney, it rose straight up, unaffected by the 60-mile-per-hour gusts. "Marcus, wait!" I shouted, but he was already opening the door. Light spilled out, warm and inviting. Marcus stepped inside and we heard him say, "Oh, thank God, we need help. We have hypothermic hikers." His words cut off abruptly. I reached the door and looked inside. Marcus was standing in the middle of a single room, frozen in place. The cabin was furnished like something from the 1800s. A fireplace with a genuine fire burning, a rough wooden table, shelves with old-style provisions, even oil lamps on the walls. But everything was wrong. The fire burned without crackling, without sound. The shadows it cast didn't move naturally. They seemed to flow like liquid, and there was someone sitting in a chair by the fireplace. An old man, or what looked like an old man. He wore clothes from another century, buckskin and furs, a long gray beard. His eyes reflected the firelight strangely, too bright, like an animal's eyes. He was smiling at Marcus, but the smile was all wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. "Come in, all of you," the old man said, and his voice was like wind through a cave, echoing and hollow. "Shelter from the storm, warmth, rest. You're so tired. You've been climbing so long. Stay." Marcus took a step toward the fireplace. His movements were mechanical, jerky, like a puppet on strings. I grabbed Marcus by his jacket and yanked him backward out of the cabin. He stumbled, and the spell, or whatever it was, seemed to break. He gasped, looking around confused. "Don't go inside," I shouted to the rest of my team. "Get the hikers away from this structure, now!" The old man stood up from his chair. He was impossibly tall, unfolding to over 7 feet, his proportions all wrong. His head brushed the cabin's ceiling, but the cabin had looked much smaller from outside. "You're refusing hospitality." The voice was angry now, losing its human quality. "I offer shelter and you refuse? That's not how the mountains work. That's not the old law." I backed away from the door, pulling Marcus with me. My team had the hikers and was retreating into the blizzard. The warm light from the cabin seemed to reach after us, stretching through the snow, trying to pull us back. "The old law says travelers must accept shelter offered in a storm," the thing in the cabin said, stepping into the doorway. Up close, I could see it wasn't human at all. The beard was made of frost. The skin was like old leather stretched over something that wasn't quite bone. "You're breaking the old law. There are consequences." "We don't accept anything from you," I said, still backing away. "We don't recognize your claim." The thing tilted its head, studying me. "You know the old stories. Good. Then you know I can't force you. But you've seen my cabin. You know where it is now. You'll always know. And one day you'll need shelter. One day the storm will be too strong and you'll remember the warm fire, the safety, and you'll come back." The cabin door slammed shut. The light in the window went out. When the next gust of wind cleared the snow for just a moment, the cabin was gone. Nothing but undisturbed snowfield remained. We got off the mountain. The hikers survived. Marcus doesn't remember anything from the moment he saw the cabin until I pulled him out of it. The GPS track from our rescue showed we never deviated from the trail. According to the data, we never went east, never found any cabin. But I know what I saw. More importantly, I know that thing in the cabin was right. I do know where it is now. I can feel it up there waiting. On the worst nights when I'm home safe and warm, I dream about that cabin. In my dreams, I'm climbing the mountain in a blizzard, freezing, dying. And I see that warm orange light through the snow. I see the smoke rising from the chimney, and I'm so cold, so tired. The temptation to open that door is overwhelming. I wake up sweating, terrified that one night I won't wake up. One night I'll open that door in my dream and find myself actually standing in that cabin with that thing smiling at me, telling me I finally accepted its hospitality. I've been trying to retire, to leave mountain rescue. But I can't. Because other people go up that mountain. Other people might see that cabin, and if they do, someone needs to be there to pull them back before they step inside. Because I don't think anyone who stays in that cabin ever comes back out. Story 2. The Ascending Blizzard. Katherine Reeves had been a meteorologist for 22 years, specializing in severe weather systems in the Rocky Mountains. She'd studied blizzards, avalanches, and atmospheric phenomena that most people only read about in disaster reports. At 47, with graying blonde hair usually tied back in a practical ponytail, She thought she understood how weather worked at high altitude. The storm that hit Mount Rainier on January 9, 2019 taught her that some things don't follow the rules. Katherine was stationed at Camp Muir, the base camp at 10,188 feet on Mount Rainier, conducting a research study on wind patterns and snow accumulation. She had a small team with her, 2 graduate students, Yuki Tanaka and Michael Torres, and a climbing guide named Sarah Drummond who knew the mountain better than anyone. The forecast had been clear. A moderate storm system was approaching from the west, expected to bring snow but nothing unusual. Standard winter conditions for Rainier. They were prepared for it, equipped to continue their research through typical bad weather. The storm that arrived was not typical. It began normally enough around 3 p.m. Snow started falling, light at first, then heavier. Wind picked up from the west, reaching 30 miles per hour. Katherine and her team secured their equipment and settled into their shelter, a reinforced structure built specifically for research purposes. By 5 p.m., something changed. Katherine noticed it first on her instruments. The barometric pressure was rising instead of falling. In a storm system, pressure drops. That's basic meteorology. But her barometer showed pressure increasing steadily, climbing higher than it should be at this altitude. "That can't be right," Yuki said, checking the equipment. "The gauge must be malfunctioning." Katherine checked the backup instruments. They showed the same impossible readings. The pressure was rising and the temperature was dropping fast. Minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit and falling. The wind had increased to 50 miles per hour, but here was the strange part. The wind direction kept changing. It cycled through all points of the compass in a regular pattern. North, then east, then south, then west, every 15 minutes like clockwork. "I've never seen a storm do that," Sarah said, looking at Katherine's data. "Wind doesn't rotate that precisely. It shifts, but not in a pattern." By 7 p.m., they realized something was seriously wrong. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was rising. Michael saw it first through the window. "Is the wind blowing snow upward?" They all looked. In the beam of their external lights, they could see snow moving vertically, flowing up the mountain slope like a river in reverse. Individual flakes weren't just being carried by updrafts. They were actively moving upward against gravity, streaming past the window in the wrong direction. Katherine grabbed her handheld anemometer and her emergency radio. "I'm going to take readings outside. This is unprecedented." "Bad idea," Sarah said immediately. "We don't know what's causing this. Could be dangerous." "This is my job. I need data." Katherine was already putting on her extreme cold weather gear. Against Sarah's advice, Katherine stepped outside with Michael, leaving Yuki and Sarah to monitor from inside. The storm hit them like a physical force, but the wrongness of it was immediately apparent. The snow was definitely moving upward, flowing up the mountain in streams and spirals. Katherine held out her hand and watched snowflakes land, then lift off and continue their upward journey. The wind was screaming, but when Katherine checked her anemometer, it showed only 20 miles per hour. The sound didn't match the speed. It was like the storm was making noise it shouldn't be making, roaring with a volume far exceeding what the wind speed could produce. Then the sound resolved into something else. Words. Katherine and Michael heard them simultaneously, looked at each other with wide eyes. The wind was speaking, or something in the wind was speaking. Voices layered over each other in dozens of languages. Katherine caught phrases. "Climb higher." "The summit calls." "Ascend, ascend." "We need to get inside," Michael shouted, grabbing Katherine's arm. They turned back toward the shelter and froze. It was further away than it should be. They'd walked maybe 20 feet from the door. Now it appeared to be 100 feet away, the lights distant and small. "Did we walk further than I thought?" Michael's voice was panicked. They started back toward the shelter, trudging through snow that resisted their movement like they were walking through water. The distance to the door didn't seem to decrease. If anything, the lights were getting smaller. Katherine looked at her GPS. The coordinates showed they were still right next to the shelter, less than 5 meters from the door. But visually, it looked like they were hundreds of feet away and the distance was increasing. The voices in the wind grew louder. Climb higher. Ascend. The summit. Come to the summit. Katherine felt a powerful urge to turn around, to start climbing upward. The summit of Mount Rainier was over 4,000 feet above their current position. Climbing toward it in this storm would be suicide, but the compulsion was strong, almost overwhelming. Michael started walking uphill. Katherine grabbed him. "No, Michael, snap out of it!" He turned to look at her, and his eyes were unfocused, glazed. "We need to reach the summit. Can't you hear them calling? We need to go up." Katherine slapped him hard across the face. He blinked, awareness returning. What was I doing? "The storm is doing something to us. We need to get inside, now." They linked arms and forced themselves toward the shelter lights, ignoring the GPS, ignoring the visual distance, just walking in a straight line. The snow pushed against them, flowing upward around their bodies, trying to lift them, carry them up the mountain. Katherine felt her feet start to leave the ground, and she dropped to her knees, pulling Michael down with her. They crawled the last distance to the shelter. Sarah pulled the door open and dragged them inside. "What happened out there? You were gone for 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Katherine checked her watch. 4 minutes had passed according to her timepiece. They sealed the door and huddled around their instruments. The readings were getting more impossible by the minute. The barometric pressure was now showing levels that should only exist at sea level. The temperature had dropped to minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit, and every instrument that measured vertical movement, GPS altitude, radar altimeter, laser rangefinder, showed the same bizarre reading. They were rising. "We're ascending," Yuki said, voice shaking. "According to this, we're at 10,500 feet. We were at 10,188. The shelter is moving up the mountain." "That's impossible," Sarah said, but she went to the window. Through the blizzard, they could make out the faint shapes of landmarks that should be above them, rock formations that marked positions at 10,400 feet. They were level with them now. The shelter was sliding up the mountain, carried by the ascending blizzard. Katherine made a decision. "We need to abandon the shelter, get our emergency gear. We're rappelling down, getting below this thing." They grabbed survival packs and rope. Sarah, the experienced climber, took charge of the technical aspects. They opened the door and immediately felt the upward force. The snow wasn't just rising anymore, it was a current, like being in rapids, trying to carry them upward. Sarah anchored a rope to a rock outcropping that jutted through the snow. "We rappel down using this, don't let go. The storm wants us to go up." One by one, they went over the edge. The sensation was nightmarish. Gravity pulled down, but the storm pushed up, creating a horrible, disorienting sense of suspension. They descended through snow that moved wrongly, past rocks that seemed to shift position, through air that whispered constantly, "Ascend. Come up. The summit. Join us at the summit." Katherine looked up once during the descent and wished she hadn't. The shelter was far above them now, at least 1,000 feet higher, being carried up Mount Rainier by the impossible blizzard. And around it, in the swirling snow, she saw shapes. Human-shaped, or once human figures moving upward with the snow, climbing eternally toward the summit, trapped in the ascending storm. Climbers who died on the mountain. Climbers whose bodies were never recovered. The mountain had them now, and the ascending blizzard carried them up and up forever. The descent took hours. They had to anchor and rappel multiple times, fighting the upward current every foot of the way. Katherine's arms burned with exhaustion. Her face was numb with cold. But they kept moving down, down, always down. At 8,000 feet below the tree line, the storm's power faded. The snow began falling normally. Gravity reasserted itself fully. They collapsed in the snow, exhausted, but alive. When rescue teams reached them the next morning, Katherine tried to explain what happened. Her instruments and data had been left in the shelter, which was never found. Search teams went to Camp Muir. The research shelter was gone. No trace of it remained. According to official reports, it had been destroyed by avalanche, but Katherine knows better. It's still up there, being carried higher and higher by a storm that doesn't obey natural laws. Maybe it's reached the summit by now. Maybe it keeps going past the summit, up into the sky, ascending forever. She never returned to Mount Rainier. She transferred her research to computer modeling, staying at sea level. But sometimes, on winter nights when the wind blows hard, she hears that voice. Ascend, climb higher, come to the summit. And she wonders how many climbers have heard that voice over the years. How many followed it up, up into the ascending blizzard and never came back down. Story 3. The Frozen Echo. Daniel Park was a solo winter mountaineer, one of the few who specialized in climbing dangerous peaks alone during the most brutal months. At 34, he'd summited mountains across 3 continents in winter conditions that would send most climbers home. He was experienced, methodical, and respected the mountain's power. The Swiss Alps were familiar territory to him, particularly the Eiger with its notorious north face that had claimed dozens of lives. On February 3, 2021, Daniel was attempting a solo winter ascent of the North Face. It was technically forbidden without special permits, but Daniel had connections and experience. He started his climb at 4 a.m. from Kleine Scheidegg, moving fast and light, planning to summit and descend within 18 hours. The weather forecast was acceptable. Clear skies, temperatures around -20 Celsius, winds at 15 miles per hour. Challenging but manageable for someone of Daniel's skill level. By 11 a.m., he was at approximately 3,200 meters, moving up the face at good pace. That's when the freak storm hit. It came from nowhere, no warning, just suddenly the sky went dark and snow began falling so heavily Daniel couldn't see the rock 2 feet in front of his face. The wind went from 15 miles per hour to what felt like 60 in seconds. The temperature plummeted. Daniel found a small ledge and anchored himself, preparing to wait out the storm. He'd been in situations like this before. You don't fight the mountain. You endure. Then he heard the voice. Hello? Is someone there? I need help. It was a man's voice, American accent coming from somewhere above him in the storm. Daniel looked up but could see nothing through the blizzard. Where are you? Daniel shouted back. I'm stuck. My rope is tangled. I can't move. Please, I've been here for hours. Daniel's rescue instincts kicked in despite the dangerous situation. Another climber in trouble. He had to help. He started climbing upward, following the voice. Keep talking so I can find you, Daniel called out. I'm here. Hurry, please. I'm so cold. Daniel climbed for 10 minutes, moving carefully despite the urgency. The voice stayed the same distance ahead, never getting closer. That should have been his first warning. What's your name? Daniel shouted. Robert Chen. I'm from California. Please hurry. Something clicked in Daniel's memory. Robert Chen. That name was familiar. He couldn't place it immediately, but he knew it from somewhere. The climbing got treacherous. Ice on the rock, holds difficult to find, visibility 0. But the voice kept calling, kept pleading for help. Daniel couldn't abandon someone. After 30 minutes of climbing, he stopped. According to his altimeter, he'd climbed 150 meters, but that was impossible. The storm was too severe, the climbing too technical. He couldn't have covered that distance that quickly. Robert Chen, where are you exactly? Right here. Can't you see me? I'm right here." The voice was still the same distance away. Daniel hadn't gained on it at all despite climbing for half an hour. That's when he remembered where he'd heard the name. Robert Chen had died on the Eiger's north face in 1994. 27 years ago, his body had never been recovered. Daniel stopped climbing. The cold realization washed over him. He wasn't following a living person, he was following an echo, a ghost, something the mountain had trapped. "I'm sorry," Daniel said to the storm. "I can't help you, you're already gone." The voice changed immediately. The pleading tone vanished, replaced by something cold and angry. "Then you'll stay too. You'll join us. You'll add your voice to ours." Us. Daniel heard them then. Multiple voices in the storm, all calling out, "Help me! I'm stuck! Please, I'm so cold. Don't leave me!" Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all the climbers who died on this mountain, all trapped in some horrible existence, forever calling for help that would never come. The storm intensified impossibly, and the cold went beyond physical. It was like the temperature dropped into a realm that shouldn't exist. A cold that froze not just body, but somehow consciousness itself. Daniel felt his thoughts slowing, crystallizing, becoming rigid. He looked at his hand and saw frost forming on his glove, but not normal frost. It was spreading in patterns, in fractals that looked almost like words, like the frost itself was trying to communicate. The patterns spelled names: Robert Chen, Marcus Dreyer, Svetlana Petrov, Johann Schmidt. Climbers who died here, their names written in ice. Daniel realized with horror that if he died here, his name would join them. Daniel Park would crystallize into the ice, and his voice would call out in future storms, luring other climbers upward to join the frozen echo. He started descending immediately, rappelling down through the blizzard. The voices screamed at him, "Don't leave! Stay with us! You can't escape! The mountain keeps us all!" The descent was a nightmare. Multiple times Daniel couldn't find his anchors, couldn't remember where he'd placed protection. The storm tried to confuse him, to turn him around, to make him climb up instead of down. His altimeter went crazy, showing readings that jumped randomly. 3,300 meters, then 2,900, then 3,400, then 2,700. He couldn't trust his instruments. He had to trust his body, his sense of gravity, the pull downward. Shapes appeared in the storm. Climbers, or what looked like climbers, frozen in various positions on the rock face. Some were reaching out to him, mouths open in silent screams. Some were climbing, moving in jerky stop motion like old film, repeating the same movements over and over, the frozen echo of their final moments, trapped and replaying forever. Daniel saw Robert Chen. He was hanging from a tangled rope exactly as his voice had described, but frozen solid, body covered in ice, mouth open in that eternal cry for help. As Daniel descended past him, Chen's head turned to follow him, ice cracking and the mouth moved. "Why won't you help me?" "You're dead," Daniel whispered. "I'm sorry, but you're dead. I can't help the dead." He kept descending. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, or maybe days. Time felt wrong, stretched and compressed simultaneously. The cold had penetrated so deep that Daniel couldn't feel his fingers anymore, couldn't feel his face. He was operating on pure survival instinct. Finally, blessedly, the storm began to thin. Daniel could see real rock again, not storm-shrouded phantoms. His altimeter stabilized. He was at 2,800 meters. Still high, still dangerous, but below whatever boundary separated the normal mountain from the frozen echo. He made it to Kleine Scheidegg at 11 p.m., 19 hours after starting his climb. He'd failed to summit, but he was alive. The storm had been localized to the north face, he learned later. Weather stations showed it as a brief squall, nothing significant. But Daniel knew better. That wasn't a normal storm. It was something the mountain created, or something that lived in the mountain, a trap made of cold and voices and the memories of the dead. Daniel never climbed the Eiger again. In fact, he gave up solo mountaineering entirely. He still climbs, but always with partners now, always with people who can verify reality, who can pull him back if he starts following voices in a storm. But he still hears them sometimes, even at sea level, even in the middle of summer. When the wind blows hard, when ice forms on windows, he hears that chorus of voices, "Help me, I'm stuck, please, I'm so cold." The frozen echo calling forever from the mountain, trying to add more voices to its eternal choir. Story 4. The White Walker. Samantha Torres had been a wildlife photographer for 15 years, specializing in capturing images of animals in extreme environments. She'd photographed polar bears in the Arctic, snow leopards in the Himalayas, and was now in the Cascade Range of Washington State, tracking a rare white wolf that had been sighted multiple times near Mount Baker. It was early March 2020, and Samantha was alone at a remote cabin at 6,500 feet elevation waiting for the wolf to appear. The blizzard that hit on March 11th wasn't in any forecast. It arrived at dusk, the sky going from clear to opaque white in minutes. Samantha secured her cabin and settled in. She'd weathered storms before. Her cabin was well stocked with 2 weeks of supplies, a backup generator, satellite phone, and all the emergency gear she needed. The storm raged through the night. Samantha watched through her window as snow piled up, already past 3 feet by midnight. The wind howled, shaking the cabin's walls, but she was safe, warm, and content to wait it out. At 1:37 a.m., she saw someone walking through the storm. Samantha pressed her face to the window, trying to see clearly through the swirling snow. Yes, definitely a person moving past the cabin about 50 yards away. They were walking calmly, steadily, as if the blizzard wasn't there. No struggle against the wind, no difficulty with the deep snow. Just walking. Samantha grabbed her flashlight and opened the door, shouting, "Hey, do you need help?" The figure stopped and turned toward her. It was too far away to see clearly, just a silhouette in the storm. It stood motionless for a long moment, then continued walking, disappearing into the white. Samantha closed the door, disturbed but not yet frightened. Maybe it was a ranger on snowshoes checking the area, but at nearly 2 a.m. in a massive blizzard, that didn't make sense. She went back to watching the storm. 20 minutes later, the figure walked past again. Same direction, same steady pace. Samantha grabbed her camera this time and took photos through the window using the cabin's exterior light. The figure showed up clearly in her viewfinder, but something was wrong with it. It was wearing white, not winter gear, just white. White clothes that seemed to blend with the snow, making it hard to distinguish where the figure ended and the blizzard began. And it left no footprints. Samantha could see the pristine snow behind it, undisturbed. The figure stopped again when it was directly in front of her cabin. It turned to face her window. Samantha couldn't make out any features, no face, just a white shape, vaguely human in form. It raised one arm, pointing at her cabin. Then it continued walking and vanished into the storm. Samantha checked her photos. In the images, the figure appeared even stranger. It was translucent in places, the storm visible through its body. In one photo, taken as it pointed, she could see its arm was wrong, too long, with too many joints. She tried her satellite phone. Dead. No signal at all, which shouldn't be possible. Satellite phones worked in any weather. She checked her cell phone. Same thing, no signal, not even an emergency connection. Her radio picked up only static. At 3 a.m., the figure walked past again. This time it was closer, only 30 yards from the cabin. Samantha could see more details now. Its face was a blank white surface, smooth and featureless. Where eyes should be were 2 dark hollows, and when it opened its mouth, if it was a mouth, there was only darkness inside. It stopped in front of her cabin again. This time it didn't just point. It started walking directly toward her door. Samantha backed away from the window, heart pounding. She heard footsteps on the cabin's porch, heavy and deliberate. The door handle rattled. Something tried the door, testing it, pushing against the lock. "Go away!" Samantha shouted. "I'm armed!" She wasn't, but maybe the lie would help. The handle stopped rattling. Silence for a moment, then a sound that made Samantha's blood freeze. Knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. She didn't answer. She stood in the middle of the cabin, staring at the door, barely breathing. 3 more knocks, harder this time. "What do you want?" Samantha's voice shook despite her attempt to sound brave. A voice answered from outside. It sounded like wind, like the storm itself speaking. "Let me in. It's cold. I need shelter. There's a ranger station 5 miles down the mountain. Go there." "Too far. So cold. Let me in. You must let me in." The law of the mountains. Travelers must share shelter. Samantha remembered an old story her grandfather had told her, a folk tale from his native Spain about something called a Blancanieves, a winter spirit that walked in blizzards and asked for shelter. If you let it in, it would freeze you from the inside out. If you refused 3 times, it had to leave. "No, you can't come in." Silence. Then, "Let me in. I'm freezing to death out here. Please, have mercy." "No, I don't know you. You can't come in." The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly. Samantha could see her breath now. Frost began forming on the windows, on the walls, spreading in complex patterns. "Last chance," the voice said, and now it was angry, losing its false pleading tone. "Let me in." "No. Get away from my cabin." A scream split the night, inhuman and horrible, like wind through a canyon mixed with an animal's death cry. The cabin shook. The windows cracked but didn't break. The door buckled inward but held. Then silence. Samantha waited, shaking with adrenaline and cold. Minutes passed. Nothing. She approached the door carefully and looked out the peephole. Nothing visible but storm. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat with her back to the wall, watching the door and windows, waiting for sunrise. Dawn came late, the light gray and weak. The storm was still raging, but slightly less intense. Samantha checked outside cautiously. Deep snow surrounded the cabin, but on her porch there were no footprints. No sign anyone had been there. But there were marks on her door, 3 deep scratches in the wood, spaced like finger marks. Only the fingers would have been 8 inches long. She spent that day trying to get communications working. Nothing. The satellite phone stayed dead, and radio picked up only static. At dusk, the figure returned. It walked past her cabin, closer than before, only 20 yards away. It stopped and stared at her window for a full minute, then continued into the storm. Every night for 6 nights it came. Each night it walked closer. Each night it stopped and stared longer. Each night it tried her door, knocking 3 times, asking to be let in. Each night Samantha refused. On the 7th night the pattern changed. The figure appeared at her window, its blank white face pressed against the glass. Samantha screamed and fell backward. The thing's mouth opened and darkness poured out, darkness deeper than the night, an absence of light that hurt to look at. 7 days, the voice said, coming from everywhere and nowhere. 7 refusals. You know the old ways, you know the rules. On the 8th day, I don't need to ask anymore. The figure melted into the storm, and the temperature in the cabin plummeted to below freezing despite her heater running full blast. Ice formed on everything, thick and fast. Samantha made a decision. She couldn't stay for an 8th night. She had to leave, storm or no storm. She packed a survival bag, loaded it with emergency supplies, strapped on snowshoes, and at first light on the 8th day, she opened her cabin door and started down the mountain. The storm tried to stop her. Wind pushed her back, snow tried to blind her, cold tried to freeze her solid. But Samantha kept moving down, always down, following her GPS, following her instinct. She saw the white figure multiple times during her descent. It walked beside her, paralleling her path, never quite approaching but always visible at the edge of her vision. Sometimes it walked upright, sometimes it moved on all fours like an animal. Sometimes it seemed to glide across the snow without touching it. It never spoke again, just watched. After 12 hours of fighting through the blizzard, Samantha made it to the ranger station at 3,000 feet elevation. The storm stopped immediately when she crossed that threshold, like walking through a curtain. The sky was clear, stars visible. The ranger on duty looked at her in shock. She was covered in ice, hypothermic, barely conscious. They took her to a hospital in Bellingham. She recovered physically within a week. Psychologically took longer. The ranger station sent people to check her cabin. It was gone. Not buried in snow, not damaged. Gone. The location where it had stood was bare rock and old-growth forest, as if no cabin had ever been there. Samantha's equipment, her photos, her research, all vanished with the cabin. She never returned to winter photography. She works in warm climates now, photographing tropical wildlife, avoiding snow and cold. But sometimes on winter nights, when wind rattles her windows, she sees a white shape standing outside in the darkness. Watching, waiting, patient. Because the White Walker, whatever it was, is still out there in the mountains, still walking through blizzards, still approaching cabins, still knocking 3 times and asking to be let in. And some nights Samantha fears she'll forget to refuse.